like much of what happens in healthcare today, national drug policies are navigated in the shadows of the global drug giants. Yet in the wake of repeated protests from the pharmaceutical industry, Australia's tough evidence-based program is becoming something of an international model.
The key strength of the program is that in subsidising drugs for the entire population, it selects drugs and prices drugs on the basis of the evidence of how well they work.
The people of working class Newcastle, like all Australians, receive affordable medicines, courtesy of the Pharmaceutical Benefits Scheme. Newcastle Professor David Henry is one of the architects of the scheme's evidence-based approach.
The Pharmaceutical Benefits Scheme is a national insurance program that guarantees a supply of essential medicines at prices that people can afford. And by subsidising the drugs for the community, the government helps people get access, but it also becomes a large player in the market. And because it becomes a large purchaser of medications, it manages to negotiate very good prices on behalf of the community.
Well, the key strength of our system is that it is rigorously evidence-based. We apply rigorous cost-effectiveness tests, and I'm confident that the Pharmaceutical Benefits Advisory Committee does a good job in their assessment.
The advisory committee uses evidence from systematic reviews to compare new drugs with old ones, recommending to government to reject or accept the new product on the national scheme.
There are two principles that underlie the scheme. One is the notion of equity, that is that everybody should have access to medications based on their individual need, their capacity to benefit, but not their capacity to pay. So that's the first principle. The second principle is that the scheme should operate efficiently. Yeah, evidence-based medicine.
International interest in the Australian system has meant this team from the University of Newcastle regularly runs workshops in low and middle income countries, sharing the principles of Australia's approach.
The thing that people get out of the workshops is that they go away with confidence that they're right. Most of the time they're pretty sure that they're making the right judgments about information or scientific evidence or whatever it might be. But because they're not as familiar with it as perhaps other people are, they don't have the confidence to stick by their own judgments.
And in the workshops that we run, we try and build confidence in decision makers in that the ground rules for their negotiations with sellers of drugs, manufacturers of drugs, should be evidence. And also to build in scepticism, and they should not believe everything that they've been told.
The PBS is an integral part of our health system. It is a good way of trying to ensure that people do get access to drugs without allowing the drug companies to get away with gouging of people. And I'm not surprised that therefore the PBS is being looked at by other countries such as Iran, Latvia, South Africa as potential models for their system.
One place where Australia's system is having a big influence is South Africa, where drug prices are on average 30% higher, and the government wants to make medicines much more affordable, particularly in the nation's large private health sector.
Because the price is loaded.
Anban Pillay did his PhD with the team from the University of Newcastle, whose workshops are greatly empowering South African officials.
We're already seeing a lot of payoff from that. The Central Drugs Committee has a lot of people on it now who understand the principles of evidence-based medicine. And pharmaceutical companies are finding it more difficult to try to push a particular drug to be on the list without providing the necessary evidence.
It does give you the confidence. It does take it away from the personal level and bias and preference, and it puts it on a pedestal of looking at the evidence objectively.
The South African government hopes that lowering the price of medicines in the private sector will take pressure off public pharmacies like this one in Pretoria, where people can waste an entire morning waiting. The government also hopes to end what it calls the perversities of the old system, whereby those retailing drugs received lucrative financial incentives from the manufacturers. The biggest obstacle to reform has been a series of major legal actions, first from the drug manufacturers and now from the retail pharmacists, concerned about a drop in income due to the dispensing fees proposed in new regulations.
To make sure that the fee is not introduced, we approach those regulations with a shotgun approach and said, stop the regulations, because it's very difficult to go to court and say the quantum of a fee is not adequate. It's difficult to point that out. And that's why we went through this whole process of attacking the regulations. But the intention was to stop the dispensing fee.
This is extremely difficult because we're dealing with a sector that has been used to all of these perversities for many, many years, and they've bedded down based on the system. We're saying that the system has to change fundamentally. And for them, that's very difficult because they have to have a different mindset about business.
Whether or not the pharmacists are happy, the South African government is slowly pushing ahead, using Australia's system as a base.
We probably will go one step further than that, which is a bit different from the Australian system of asking the question, is it actually affordable? Because South Africa is a developing country, and the issue of affordability becomes critical for people having access, particularly to essential drugs.
The Australian Pharmaceutical Benefit Scheme cannot be translated directly in a comprehensive way and meet all of the needs of low and middle income countries. There are elements of the scheme that will work, there are other elements that won't, and it's important to understand the downside of this.
According to David Henry, the PBS is too focused on individual drugs rather than whole classes of medicines or entire health programs. But the concept of whether a new drug provides value for money has made a big impression in South Africa and may soon become a routine part of drug regulation.
When we are considering new drugs for registration, we'll look at the safety, we'll look at the efficacy, we'll look at the quality. But we also have to apply our minds to the fourth hurdle, which is now, is this drug, the way it's priced, value for money? We may stumble along the way as we are trying to roll this out, and we were going to need the support of other regional authorities in other countries where they could share their experiences with us and we can share our experiences with them, so that at the very inception of this, we don't do it wrong. We try and do it right to the best of our ability.
While drug companies in South Africa are now tentatively supporting the general direction of reform, industry in Australia has declined to publicly discuss its view, despite a history of attacks on key principles of the PBS. But as those principles spread across the globe, it's likely that some within industry now realise Australia's PBS is not an experiment that can be squashed, but is a new standard in the fair and efficient provision of essential medicines.